Hey guys, today I'm going to be painting the Moon Daimyo from Rising Sun. But first, a picture of my kitten. Actually, I just had nothing to put behind this, but really this is kind of my top patrons, but I really want to give a shout out to all of my patrons because through them, I've been able to actually get a new camera, an upgraded lighting system, a whole kind of painting setup. So I'm going to be having some 4K footage of the next painting miniature that I do. So look forward to that. This is the last blurry, unfocused 1080p video you'll see from me for miniature painting. Now with that, we're going to actually go ahead and start. I'm going to start today with Emerald, and this is going to be, it's a fun color anyway, it's a really cool green, but I'm just doing it on the gloves and then the kind of socks that he has. Now, I actually forget his hand on his waist, so be sure to get that now, though I'm not doing any highlighting on it or anything like that, so I just tack it before. Now I'm going to try non-metallic metal again like I did with Conan, but I'm going to do it better, I think. This is my second time doing it, and I think I am improving. I'm going to start with just a base coat of uniform gray, so I'm kind of starting in the middle. Then I'll both highlight and darken it progressively. Now, if you don't want to do non-metallic metal, just put some plate mail metal on there or some other silver that you like and then call it done. It's much quicker, this takes more time, but I actually find it really fun to do all of this. So now I'll have ash gray out. And right now, it's not super watered down. I'm just kind of penciling in kind of the areas that I want. So I'm going to want a little bit of a shine there. And then, you know, the edge highlighted there. So I'm just going to rub the end of my brush against it. And so just kind of mapping out how it looks like. I do the exact same on the other side, but I'm not going to bother showing that. Now, after this is when a lot of the blending happens. So we're going to go dark, I believe, first. But yeah, so Necromancer, Cloak. So we're going to now pencil in kind of the darker areas. And I'm putting it right up to the highlight there, but getting it fairly close. And then I'm going to start blending. And it's going to take a lot of blending. Non-metallic metal, essentially, for a detailed miniature like this, it's not going to double the time, but it does add a significant amount of time. It does take longer, but it is pretty cool. And if you actually have a controlled light source, you can also now control how the highlight works on the actual metal itself, because it's a fixed highlight, which is kind of cool as well. Now I have Administratum gray out. This is actually fairly watered down, so I actually do this in a couple of coats, but just kind of glazing it in there. That being said, it's not as thin as when I'm actually blending in between, so it's still fairly strong. I am wanting it to actually brighten it up, but it's certainly you know, not quite fully opaque or transparent. It's kind of right there in the middle. Alright, now we have uniform gray out again, and as you can see, it's very, very watered down. You can also see on my thumb I have some slash marks, so what I'm starting to do now is kind of load it up, damp it off on a napkin or a paper towel or something like that, but then before I put it there, I'm still testing it on my thumb and also getting rid of some, so I'm just kind of making it to where it's very, very thin. I'm just blending just the area where they kind of meet, going up with the brush or down with the brush depending on what I want to do. Sometimes I want to bring it farther, so I bring it down. Sometimes I bring it into the highlight if I want to just kind of help blend it. Now I've only added some matte white to the Administratum gray. This is for a more extreme highlight. I am skipping a few steps where I did that blend a few times, but I'm only showing it to you once. You're just going to keep playing with it. At this point, it's kind of like seasoning to taste. You're just highlighting and blending and darkening to taste. Get it however dark or however bright you want. Just realize that to sell this effect, you need a very high contrast. So as long as it goes from very bright to very dark in some method, it should be pretty good. Though, again, this is my second time doing it, so I'm just your average guy. I'm not an expert, but, you know, I don't know. Do it to where you're happy with it, right? But I can go for the whole painting, I suppose. Now, to deepen that contrast, like I said, we're going to add a little bit of Abaddon Black. And this is into the Necromancer's Cloak. This is pretty darn dark, as you can see. And then again, I'm going to blend this a little bit too. I wasn't actually going to do this at first. I was just going to use Necromancer Cloak as the darkest, but I think this really helped sell that shine even more. And so I would highly encourage, again, go dark, more than you would think. I'm normally not one for extreme highlights or anything like that, but I think for non-metallic metal, it works quite well if you make sure you have a good contrast. All right, but moving on with that, let's get the miniature painted here. Mouldy Clothes, that's on the inner cloth he has here. So he has kind of an inner and an outer cloth, that's how I label it. In the description below where I have all my paint listed there. So again, that's in every miniature painting video. Those are literally my notes I use to paint him. So just head down there and you don't necessarily have to follow the whole video. These videos are pretty long. I'm not going to be tagging every single timestamp, so just kind of go with it. Goblin Green is now for the top one, and you'll note that this is fairly close. This is not a super big difference, but it's because this is going to get a wash on it to darken it. So again, you want to think about the end result of the paint when you're done with it, after the washes, after the highlights, not just what it looks like as a base coat. So base coat, it might look a little off or it might look a little weird, but different techniques, different methods, different paints added onto it will affect it differently. So right now, kind of close, still a little bit darker though. All right, next up, Athonian Camoshade. Like I said, we're going to put this just on the outer portion of his cloth, the one that we did Goblin Green. He takes long enough to paint to where you can just start right back up, just repeat, where you painted, and you should be good. I'm putting it actually fairly heavy. I want a little bit, because again, I want it to stay kind of darker, so I'm letting it pool more than I sometimes would, but not excessively. If you do it too much, it gets kind of shiny as it dries, and you don't want that. Next up, Moot Green. This is going to be the highlight for the inner cloth. And really, this is almost it. I'm going to change one thing from my plan that I originally had. We'll get to that in a moment. But for now, just highlight it Moot Green. Now, I'm not quite happy with the contrast there. It doesn't show up enough. So I've re-gotten my Athonian Camoshade out. Feel free to do this at the same time. Learn from my mistakes. I'm showing them here for you so you can help learn a little bit and just paint in the shadows very lightly. Again, there's not a whole lot. It just slightly tints it, makes it a little bit better. Now we have the Goblin Green out again, and this is just to get the base coat out. Now sometimes you can go straight to the highlight, but because I put such a heavy wash on there, that might be a bit too much of a contrast, especially with the highlight I'm going to give it. So I'm actually just going to go back with the base color and just make sure it is that Goblin Green again. So you'll get a little bit of contrast, but for the most part, once it dries, it doesn't look that noticeable, and it shouldn't. Hemp Rope is what I'm going to be highlighting this up with, and it's actually kind of cool. I really like it. It's almost like a yellow green. It just gives it a little bit of a tinge, and I think what it alludes to is kind of a reflected light. I think it looks great highlighting green. I don't know if I've ever painted anything straight hemp rope, but for highlighting the green, I think it's awesome. I don't know, it just slightly tints it and makes it a little bit more off. I really like it. As you can see now, the different greens look much different as an end result. Next up, again, another green, Death Guard Green. He's a lot of green, a lot of yellow, and even a lot of red, so kind of an interesting guy here. This is for the base coat of all the armor pieces that aren't like, gold, like his chainmail kind of interlinked or interwoven kind of metal armor there. It's just kind of his bracers and his shoulder pads here. Now, his shoulder pads we're going to do something kind of fun with, but for now, we're just painting this in. When I get to the head, you're gonna notice when you get to the head, that kind of headdress, kind of like the first Oni I painted with all the skulls in the hair. The detail, as great as these are, does kind of die off when it goes to intricate detail within hair. The mold process just can't seem to keep up with the sculpt design here, so make do how you can. It's really hard to tell what's hair, what's not hair. It's a little bit different from the concept art. Just, do whatever. In fact, if you feel like it, paint this whole thing in Death Guard Green, and then later add the trim in gold, and then just wing it that way. That wouldn't be a terrible idea. Now, I said we were going to do something cool with the shoulder pads, and this is Orc Blood, highly watered down. This is a glaze. Again, I've been putting it on my thumb, drying it out. There's not a whole lot, and I'm always going from the middle point of the shoulder pad down into the recess, because wherever you leave the brush, when you pick it up, it's going to pool there. That's where it kind of ended in the motion. And I'm just slightly tinting it. I had to do this 3 or 4 times, but do it to however much purple you want showing up. All around, it seemed his armor kind of had this kind of weird two-tone, you know, one of those really bad paint jobs on cars that people thought looked cool for a while. Kind of metal effects here. So I'm going to bring it and kind of unify it, not just on the shoulders. There it is. You know, I'm putting it on my thumb, as you can see, and making sure I have that tip really good. And then again, just doing a few coats, again, on the side armor, on the shoulder pads. I even put a little bit like on the bracers, on the top portion, and kind of in the back here, as you can see right now. Next up, Babe Blond is a very, very, very bright yellow. This guy is going to be colorful. As you probably saw in the thumbnail, he's probably the brightest miniature I've ever painted. I don't know, maybe the chibi miniature I painted, the Post Valkyrie, that I gave out to one of my patrons. That was pretty bright too. That was my first chibi, and I really tried to push myself to use bright colors. But in fact, I had to make the Babe Blond like animation for this video. Like, I don't even think I've ever even used it. It's very, very bright. But anyway, this is for kind of the tufts around a lot of the armor pieces he has in the front and on the side. Next up, we have Orange Fire, and this is going to be on the ends of the tufts, and he's also going to have two tassels that also have it. Again, just slightly kind of put it, you're going to cover about 50%, maybe even 60% of it. That's fine. In fact, it probably shouldn't be too uniform. It's just the ends of it, and it makes it look really cool. Also, I want to apologize if my voice sounds terrible. I've been getting over some kind of weird cold that took my voice, which is terrible for a YouTuber, by the way, and not something that happens often to me, so I do apologize. I'm about as good as I'm going to get for a while. It seems it's just kind of sticking with me. All right, let's get onto the red, and now we'll have kind of a lot of the base colors. Most of the miniature done with this, though the armor trim adds a lot. Trim always adds so much to a miniature. It really, that tiny little bit of detail adds so much to the visual complexity and really, I think, finalizes a lot of it. This is going to be on some tassels on his hair. You could do his hair first. By all means do that and then paint this on so you don't have to worry about the tassels. I didn't ever have to fix it. I was able to paint around it just fine, but perhaps wasn't as well planned out as it could have been. I could have maybe done this at a later time. It's not something I think that you have to do right now, but it's really fun to get that red on there too. So you have the green, the yellow, the red, the orange. This is going to be on kind of his pole. Don't worry about those gold rings. You'll paint over them. It's not worth trying to edge around that. And on every other tassel that he has. And we have Carroburg Crimson. This is a red wash. It looks awesome on red. Use it all the time. It makes it pools. When it pools, it gets very, very dark red, which I personally love anyway. But it's really easy to do extreme highlights up, which is good because if you do too many layers of highlights on red, you tend to either go pink or orange, and you want to avoid that. So if you can't keep it in the red family, and that's why I like how much this darkens it. In fact, you could even do Nuln Oil, but it can sometimes look a little dirty. I'm paying special attention to all the tassels, but then around the rings too. I think it adds a lot to darken it where that gold band would be, like where the metal's touching other metal, or I don't know. I just think it adds a little bit to it. Now, as that dries, because that didn't take too long, we're going to get gold out. This is just straight gold from Vallejo, but use whatever favorite gold you have. The gold from Vallejo, while it's more glittery than I would prefer, it is a very lightly colored gold. It's not like super orangey or red or anything like that. And most of the gold in the concept art of Rising Sun is kind of this pale, I would almost call colored gold. And so I think it's perfect for that. Don't worry about getting it on the rope or the tassels, because you're going to paint those like clasps on the tassels anyway, and the rest of the rope there is going to be a dark color, so not a big deal there. And then we're going to do the trim. The trim you're going to want to be careful on. The coverage isn't super awesome with the Vallejo gold, even not watered down. So I had to do it on a few coats in some places. You can still see a little bit of gray, but otherwise not too bad. Underside of the shoulder pads, and then those kind of front shoulder guards. The trim on the pads there, and then the tassel clasps I also painted gold, and obviously that trim in the hair. Be careful with that. It's just difficult. And then the shoes too. The shoes are, I don't know, they're really weird. I don't know how they clasp or what's going on there, but it's pretty much all just gold. Now for the sword, or I guess the blade, I should say, it's more, I don't know, is that a halberd? I don't know what they're called. Anyway, again, be very careful. You just spent a ton of time on the non-metallic metal. Don't sneeze while doing this. Well, I guess don't sneeze anytime you're painting a miniature, or maybe cough too. But the tongue kind of part that goes onto the blade, you're going to want to get the sides to really sell the gold effect. But again, just very, very small amount of paint. Good tip on your brush. Take your time. There's no two ways around it. You couldn't do the non-metallic metal, I think, with the gold first, so you're just going to have to take your time and take one for the team. Soft Tone is a great, Seraphim Sepia from Citadel would be probably the alternative. It's a great wash on gold. It's a slightly orangey, useful actually for like flesh and stuff like that, but it's also great for gold. It's kind of in that red-orange family, but still a little bit brown too. It's perfect. I really like it, because you could get a really heavy wash, but I wouldn't suggest it. I'm not sure I've ever done that. As you can see, we're getting close to done. It's not too bad. I'm going to go ahead and put Aster Granite down on here. The difference between Aster Granite and Aster Granite Debris is how thick it is. Debris is much thicker. Aster Granite, you're going to want to scrape close to the base. But notice I didn't paint a base color first, because I'm covering the whole thing fairly heavily. I'm going to touch it up a little bit afterwards. You could always do the touch up first by just painting the whole base this gray color, and then putting this on top, but either way. Now, if you have enough, Aster Granite Debris is perfect for this. Of any texture paint, you can put the basing stuff on there and it'll act as glue. It'll solidify and harden on there. Aster Granite, because it's scraped very tightly, wasn't quite enough to hold it to being used as a game piece, so I wasn't very happy with it. So I actually plucked these off and put some PVA, some Elmer's glue on there. Now to finally highlight that red, like I said, I'm going pure red. Pure red is my highlight. So that's not pink, it's not orange, it's just red. But as you can see, you can really see the difference between the Dragon Red, which was already darker, the Carroburg Crimson, which darkened it even more in the recesses, and then if you do kind of almost a heavy highlight on all this pure red, that contrast is enough. It looks great, even good. It looks really good even from a distance, and it just in general, I think that's the way to go to highlight red. This is that rope, like I said, dark stone. This is actually to match the exact same style rope that's in the Sun Daimyo. So these are both from the same expansion for Rising Sun, the Dynasty Invasion, and so the rope I think should match, and so I'm making them exactly the same as it did on the Sun Daimyo. Next up is all of the kind of hair, Rhinox hide. I think I would have done the face first, only because his mustache and his beard leave a little bit of his mouth exposed, and I had to do some touch up there after I did his face, because it's really hard to paint that with the face color and not get it on the beard. So I would do the beard after the face if I were to do this again. Otherwise, again, it's a dark brown, a great base color brown, because it can highlight super well. It does not shadow well, so you're not going to need a wash. So if you want to avoid a wash, it's also a great base brown to do, because it gets you that dark color. Even Known Oil barely shows up on this. But be careful. There's actually not too many contact points that are difficult here. It's pretty well defined sculpt-wise and miniature-wise. It's a dark color, and you don't want to have to touch up any of that. So like I said, did the face afterwards. I've already also done the eyebrows. Again, you could probably swap that up. And I'm also doing the fingers in this basic skin tone from Vallejo. My favorite skin tone out of all of them. I just think it looks good. You can darken it really well and do everything like that. Now, I got Squig Orange out here, and I have a lot on my brush, but it's highly watered down, and I'm not doing 100% coverage. I'm doing like 98% coverage. Because it almost looks like in the concept art, like I don't know if it's painted on his face. I'm not sure why his face is orange. You can tell there is normal skin under there and his fingers are normal, so whatever. Ebon Black for the pupils. Good luck. I did better on him than I did with Conan, that's for sure. In fact, only one try, but I did get a little bit on his nose, had to touch up. Speaking of touch up, here's Mechanica Standard Gray on the kind of the base coat here. Now it's nice because you can combine it by coloring these rocks. These rocks, by the way, are the Battlefield rocks from Army Painter. They're awesome. I put a link in the description below so you can buy some if you want. I use them all the time. They're essentially like spongy cork, but you'll see when they get painted and then you dry brush them and all that, they have awesome texture and they look great. Now, Known Oil all over everything on the base. Just cover it. It's straightforward. Don't even have to keep talking about it. Just Known Oil, brush, base, you're done. You gotta let that dry though. Don't try to do anything yet. So let's paint a bow. So here's the bow. This is in dark red. I did the same bow in the same color on the Sun Daimyo. Again, just adding a little bit of unison. It matches the concept art anyway, so that's cool. I don't know if the artist, I believe Adrian Smith did all this. I don't know if he did it on purpose or not, but it seemed the same to me, so may as well paint him the same. Then for the beard, we're doing a werewolf fur. A very kind of light dry brush. It's going to show up because it's such a big difference. It's going to show up really well, so you don't want too much, and you don't have to worry about it really getting on these other colors too much. Now, I'm not going to dry brush the kind of leather brown high highlights. Again, I want his beard to be fairly dark, but I do want kind of some sheen to it as if light is reflecting on it. So with the brush, very lightly, paint where, it'd kind of be raised up and maybe either to bring out definition or to kind of show that it's kind of curving. Obviously, the most extreme highlight should be at the very tip top, depending on your light source. I'm not doing anything fancy here, so it's on the tip top. Alright guys, we're almost done. Administratum Gray, dry brush that on, do it fairly heavily. I love doing this with Administratum. If you've seen my videos, you've seen I do this all the time. I go straight from a non-oiled dark gray straight to this dry brush. You can see on the rocks, it looks awesome. I love it. For the clan color, I've chosen gray blue for the Moon clan. I think this is almost perfect if you ask me. It looks good to me. And thankfully, this paint covers really well, so I only had to do 2 coats and I was done here. Now, we got to tell that this is a Daimyo as opposed to a Bushi or a Shinto or something like that. So I'm doing a little tiny strip of Abaddon Black at the bottom. This takes some time to do right and to do well, but it looks really slick at the end, and so I think it's kind of worth it. And again, you've already spent this time, and this mini is really cool and really detailed anyway, so let's do it right. Alright guys, it's painted. Slap some matte varnish. I use the Munitorium varnish from Citadel, but use whatever. Just make sure it's matte. You don't want this guy, super shiny. And this is it. This is the finished miniature. As you can see, I think he turned out actually quite well. I'm pretty happy with him. I love that non-metallic blade, by the way. I don't know. I've really been enjoying it. I've tried so many techniques at this point. I've painted quite a few minis at this point in kind of my year of painting. It's been about a year, by the way, now. A little bit over a year since I've painted my first mini. So it's just fun to experience and try new things. So there you can actually finally see the back of the non-metallic blade there. Anyway, guys, thanks so much for watching. As I said before, a super big shout out to all my patrons. I'm not monetized here on YouTube, so really it's my patrons that drive the ability to grow this channel and improve things like the camera setup. So the next time you see my miniature painting and you see it in 4K, just thank a patron. Like just leave a comment, say, hey, patrons, thanks for doing that, or whatever, because it's awesome. And they're just a fun group of people too. If you want to join, by the way, linked in the description below. I run a crazy Discord. Like literally people are insane on there, but I also have like a separate channel just for like miniature talk. If you want to be more serious, you can do that too. Anyway, guys, thanks so much. I super appreciate you watching, and I hope you liked this one. I was worried about this one by how detailed it was, but it ended up being great, and I enjoyed pretty much my entire time with it. So without further ado, that is every Daimyo in Rising Sun painted. Next up, I want to paint the River Dragon, the final dragon, and then I've painted every dragon and every Daimyo. What's next after that? Let me know in the comments below. Tell me what to paint next. Alright guys, it's time to say goodbye. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.